Hey guys, tonight we slip straight into the dark, shadows stretching, walls breathing, and silence that feels just a little too alive. It's the kind of night where every creak sounds like footsteps, and every flicker feels like a signal. You probably won't survive this if your imagination gets the better of you. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And I want to know, where are you watching from, and what time is it where you are right now? Drop it in the comments. Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. You shuffle forward, lantern in hand, though the flame trembles like it's nervous too, and suddenly the marble streets of Constantinople open beneath your feet. You can almost hear sandals scraping stone, the distant clang of bronze doors, the faint perfume of roasted lamb drifting from a tavern, and then, bam, chaos. You're not walking into a polite city, you're walking into a powder keg. Because in this city, body counts weren't always born on battlefields. They could stack up right here, in the heart of the empire, where horse races turned into riots that made entire neighborhoods collapse. The Hippodrome, yeah, you're standing in it now, wasn't just an arena for chariot races. It was where politics met adrenaline, where factions wore colors like uniforms, blues and greens. And if you thought modern soccer hooligans were bad, oh boy, these guys treated every match like life or death. People didn't just cheer, they fought, stabbed, burned. At one point, over 30,000 people were massacred here in a single week during the Nika riots of 532. 30,000. In the capital of Christendom. Imagine the Super Bowl ending with Justinian ordering soldiers to murder the entire stadium. And here's the kicker, those fans weren't just sports nuts. They were political gangs. Supporting the blues or greens was like wearing red or blue in American politics, but with knives. Now, picture this, you're sitting on a marble bench, sipping watered wine, watching two chariots thunder past. The crowd surges like a wave. People scream, fists fly. And then one sharp voice cuts through the noise, Nika? Victory. It spreads, echoing like a chant that shakes the whole arena. Except this isn't just cheering. It's rebellion. By nightfall, Constantinople burns. Senators switch sides, mobs torch palaces, and Justinian the emperor hides in panic, ready to flee by ship. His wife, Theodora, former actress, now empress, locks him in with words sharper than steel, purple makes a fine burial shroud. Translation, better to die a ruler than run like a coward. So you stick close to her, feel her fire. Justinian relents, calls his generals. Belisarius, his star commander, marches soldiers right into the Hippodrome, closing the gates. And what follows, well, you don't hear cheers anymore. You hear screams that don't stop. When it's over, the marble floors are slick, the benches piled high with corpses. 30,000 souls, erased, in the name of control. Historians still argue whether the number was exaggerated, was it 15,000? 25? Or truly 30,000? But either way, this wasn't just a riot. It was a city swallowing itself whole. And here's a strange little tidbit, some chronicles claim the rioters dragged statues of emperors from the Hippodrome and smashed them, like rebellious fans tearing down goalposts today. Imagine vandalism as performance art, except you're swinging axes at ancient marble heads. You step back now, streets still smoking, and realize something chilling. In Constantinople, you didn't need barbarians at the gates to rack up body counts. The deadliest enemies were often your neighbors, chanting in unison, blades flashing in the moonlight. And the city keeps breathing. You hear vendors calling out, rebuilding within days, as if 30,000 bodies never littered the Hippodrome at all. That's the rhythm here, death in waves, life resuming like nothing happened. Constantinople doesn't pause. It devours tragedy and keeps moving, like a beast too big to die. And you? You're just one more pair of footsteps echoing in the ruins, wondering when the next chant will rise. You're still trailing through the smoke-soaked alleys of Constantinople, your sandals crunching over broken tiles, when a deeper rumble shakes the night. This time it isn't a riot. It's the sound of steel, foreign steel, beating against shields in rhythm. You edge closer, past a column lit by torchlight, and suddenly you're staring at giants. Blonde, broad-shouldered, bearded men with axes taller than you. Their eyes gleam like ice, their laughter is half-drunk thunder. Welcome to the Varangian Guard, the Emperor's personal bodyguards. Except they're not Greek at all. They're Norsemen, Vikings turned mercenaries, later joined by Anglo-Saxons fleeing Norman conquest. These are the ultimate "you don't mess with me" squad. And they've got a reputation. Wherever they march, body counts stack like firewood. Now imagine being a Byzantine noble trying to start trouble in the palace. You turn a corner and oops, there's a wall of 6-foot Scandinavians, gripping axes designed not for chopping trees but for splitting skulls clean through helmets. Your clever speech ends real fast. The empire loved them for one reason: loyalty. While Greek generals might switch sides or plot coups, the Varangians had no stake in Byzantine politics. Their paycheck came from the emperor, and their oath was iron. That made them brutally efficient enforcers. When mobs threatened, when rebels rose, when assassins crept in the dark, the Varangians answered with steel. Mainstream fact? During the reign of Basil II, the Varangians became infamous for storming through Bulgarian lines, cutting down enemies by the thousands. Chroniclers describe them as living walls of iron. Basil himself, nicknamed the Bulgar Slayer, trusted them completely, often unleashing them like a final hammer when battles teetered. And here's the quirky tidbit: after looting campaigns, Varangians loved to carve their names into church walls. In the Hagia Sophia, you can still see graffiti scratched in runes, "Halfdan was here." Like a Viking version of spray-painted YOLO. Think about that, standing in one of Christianity's holiest spaces, and some Norse guard just etched his name like it was a bathroom stall. But loyalty? That didn't mean gentleness. Picture this: rebels corner a palace chamber. Doors burst open. You hear war cries not in Greek but in Old Norse. The axes rise, gleam, fall. Flesh parts, helmets split, screams twist into silence. The marble floors once again drink deep. Body counts soar not from whole wars but from single entrances. Historians still argue whether the Varangians were more feared for their brute strength or their cold discipline. Some say they were berserkers, roaring into battle half-mad. Others paint them as steady executioners, cutting down opposition with surgical precision. Maybe the truth is, both. And you follow them out of the city, marching in their shadow. The torches flicker off their helmets like fire on water. They carry gold-trimmed axes, they hum old songs about home, and they grin with blood still fresh on their tunics. You feel small, almost invisible, walking beside them. Because in this empire, Greeks commanded, but sometimes it was foreign giants who really decided how many bodies hit the ground. And if you glance too long at one of them, you'll notice his eyes narrow. His hand tightens on the axe. Best to keep walking. Best to stay quiet. You wake to the crunch of boots in dirt, the smell of sweat and steel, and the low moans of men who will never see again. This isn't the city anymore. You've marched into the open fields, where armies clash, where empires gamble their survival on a single line of shields. And here the body counts don't rise by hundreds. They rise by tens of thousands. The commander leading you is none other than Basil II, the emperor they called the Bulgar Slayer. The man ruled for nearly 50 years, and his name still sends a chill through the Balkans. But don't picture some cruel tyrant lounging in silk. No, Basil is lean, sharp-eyed, sleeping in tents like his men, eating rations straight from the fire. He's not here for luxury, he's here to carve his enemies down to size. And the moment that cements his legend? The Battle of Clydian, 1014. You feel the summer sun baking your armor as Byzantine troops smash into the Bulgarian lines. It's chaos, shields splinter, arrows rain, horses scream. Dust blinds your eyes, and the ground grows slick beneath your boots. Finally, after hours, the Bulgarian defense collapses. Thousands are captured. The field is silent, except for the groans of the chained. Here's where Basil rewrites history into nightmare. He doesn't just win. He makes an example. He orders the blinding of 15,000 prisoners. That's not a typo. 15,000 men, each eye gouged, each soldier stumbling in chains. And to twist the knife deeper, he leaves one man in every 100 with a single eye, so he can lead the rest back to their king. Imagine the scene, a long, endless column of staggering, bloody men, stretching over hills, shuffling home like broken ghosts. Mainstream historians confirm this mass blinding, though they debate the exact number. Some argue the chroniclers exaggerated, maybe it was closer to 8,000. Others say no, the figure holds. Either way, the image sticks, Basil sending thousands of mutilated soldiers back like a living insult. And when their king, Samuel of Bulgaria, sees his blinded army, he collapses from shock and dies 2 days later. Now here's your quirky tidbit. Later folk tales claimed Basil's enemies thought he was literally a wizard. Why? Because he fought endlessly, without tiring, and rumors spread that he had made a pact with dark forces. You almost laugh at that, until you see the dead piling so high they look like fortifications themselves. At that point, magic doesn't seem far-fetched. And if you think Basil enjoyed the cruelty, think again. Some sources suggest he did it not from sadism, but as strategy, break the spirit, not just the body. Terrifying enemies into submission without needing another fight. Still, imagine standing there, hearing the screams, smelling the copper tang of blood, watching 15,000 men stumble blind into the distance. Strategy or not, it etches itself into your bones. Historians still argue whether this single act earned Basil eternal infamy or eternal respect. Was he the savior of Byzantium? Or the butcher who sold his soul to maintain power? That debate hasn't ended in 1,000 years. But as you walk behind the column of broken soldiers, the night pressing in, you realize something: empires aren't built only on victories. They're built on spectacles of terror. And Basil's legacy, whether feared wizard or cruel tactician, is written in the stumbling footsteps of blinded men. You hear one of them trip, dragging the chain forward. Another sobs, another prays. And you, well, you're not sure if you'll ever scrub this sound from your head. The road turns coastal now, you smell salt before you see it. The Aegean stretches wide, glittering silver under moonlight, but don't be fooled. Tonight this sea isn't gentle, it's teeth and fire and smoke. You creep down toward a fishing village, expecting the soft hush of waves, and instead, you hear screams. Pirates. Not the jolly, parrots and treasure kind from movies. These are hardened killers, corsairs who stalked the Aegean in the Middle Ages, preying on Greece like wolves circling a flock. You step behind a low wall just in time to see their ships slide into the harbor, long narrow hulls, black sails snapping like wings. Torches flare, oars rise and fall. And then the raiders pour out, shouting in Arabic, Italian, sometimes even Greek. Because piracy here isn't one culture's monopoly. It's a free-for-all. Mainstream fact? The 9th and 10th centuries were a nightmare for Greek coasts. Arab pirates operating from Crete raided so often that entire stretches of shoreline emptied out. Villages fled inland, monasteries built fortresses, and coastal life felt like living with one foot in the grave. And when the Venetians joined the chaos later, piracy only sharpened. Here's your quirky tidbit: some monks actually trained carrier pigeons to warn nearby towns when pirate sails appeared on the horizon. A medieval early warning system, flapping feathers instead of radar. You can almost imagine a monk squinting at the sea, tying a note to a pigeon's leg, whispering, "Good luck, little guy," and hoping the next town bolts their doors in time. But pigeons can't stop fire. And fire is what you see now. Pirates swarm into the streets, torches whipping, homes blazing like matchsticks. A mother screams, clutching her child, before being dragged toward the shore. Men swing rusted swords, blood smears across whitewashed walls. You can smell burnt fish, burnt wood, burnt flesh all tangled together. Historians still argue whether the scale of pirate raids is exaggerated. In Byzantine chronicles, were entire regions depopulated? Or did villagers adapt, fighting back, rebuilding again and again? Either way, you're staring at a scene where survival feels like rolling dice against the sea itself. And the pirates' cruelty? It wasn't just robbery. They trafficked humans, slaves hauled in chains across the Mediterranean. Imagine being snatched from your bed and sold weeks later in a Cairo market, your language, your family, your world, gone. For coastal Greeks, the body count wasn't only who died here and now, but also who vanished into the silence of foreign ports. You duck further into the shadows, watching flames devour a church roof. The bell tolls once, then crashes into rubble. And over it all, the pirates laugh. Because to them, this isn't cruelty. It's business. And the worst part? Sometimes the empire itself cut deals with pirates. Better to bribe them, hire them, even unleash them on rivals, than fight endlessly. So you can't always tell who's an enemy and who's a contractor. That blurred line means one night they torch your village, and the next they march beside Byzantine banners as allies. The sea keeps rolling though. The Aegean never sleeps, never cares. Tomorrow morning, fishers will row out again, nets trailing. Children will play on the sand. But tonight the coast counts its dead in silence. You stare at the black horizon, watching pirate ships slip away, their sails fat with wind, their laughter carried faintly across the waves. And you know this, out here, the sea is never just water. It's a hunting ground. And Greeks lived always with one eye on the tide, wondering if tomorrow's dawn would bring trade or terror. Your feet drag heavy after the burning coast, but the path winds upward, stone steps, rugged hills, the smell of pine sap drifting in. You expect the hush of prayer, the quiet drone of chants, when you crest the ridge and see a monastery rising like a fortress. Arched gates, tall walls, a dome glinting faintly. At first glance, it feels safe. Holy. But then, you notice the spears. Rows of them, leaning by the doorway. Helmets stacked like offerings. Monks, armed. You blink. Monks aren't supposed to be soldiers, right? They're supposed to copy manuscripts, tend gardens, hum psalms. But here, in medieval Greece, monasteries were more than sanctuaries. They were banks, fortresses, and sometimes armories. And when danger prowled, cloistered brothers shed quiet robes for armor. Mainstream fact? The monastery of Mount Athos, today famous for spiritual isolation, was once raided by pirates and Turks so many times that monks petitioned emperors for permission to bear arms. These weren't battles of kings, they were small wars of survival. And when monks fought, they fought with the desperation of men protecting not just walls but relics, libraries, sacred bones of saints. Quirky tidbit. Chroniclers whisper that some monks even baptized their swords before charging, lifting them like crosses and shouting blessings mid-battle. Imagine the scene, a line of robed men, sandals slapping stone, chanting hymns that roll into war cries, half prayer, half war drum. The clash of steel mingles with liturgy, and the air itself seems split between heaven and hell. Historians still argue whether these monks were officially sanctioned militias or simply desperate men bending rules of their vows. Were they holy warriors, or backsliders with excuses? The records leave gaps, stories blurred by legend. But one truth shines: when invaders came, monasteries could erupt like hives of hornets. You creep into the courtyard now, hearing the clang of practiced swords. A circle of monks spar in the torchlight, broad-shouldered, bearded, sweat darkening their robes. Their chants overlap with grunts of exertion. One swings, another parries, sparks fly. And behind them, in a chapel, relics gleam in candlelight. The bones of saints, precious, priceless. To protect those treasures, no vow feels too strict. The walls around you smell of incense and iron. You hear a hymn rising, but the rhythm sounds almost like a march. And when the monastery bell tolls, it isn't only for prayer, it's a call to arms. Tonight, raiders climb the hill. You see shadows darting along the tree line, blades catching moonlight. The monks line the walls, torches blazing. A cross is raised, and then the arrows fly. You watch them loose a volley, then draw steel. Robes swirl as they surge forward, sandals slipping in blood. Their chants don't stop even as blades bite. It's haunting, battle as liturgy, killing as sacrifice. The ground trembles. You almost laugh at the surreal sight. A monk trips, curses under his breath, then immediately mutters a prayer like he's bargaining with heaven mid-swing. Humor even in slaughter. And when dawn breaks, smoke curls above the monastery. Dozens of bodies lie scattered down the slope, invaders mostly, but a few monks as well, their robes torn, hands still clutching hilts. Survivors ring the chapel, chanting softly again, as if nothing ever broke the silence. For you, though, the image lingers, faith and violence twined like rope. Monks who defend relics with blood, who baptize steel, who blur the line between devotion and destruction. In this land, even men of prayer can count their dead. And sometimes, they're the ones adding to the count. The incense and blood of the monastery fade, but the road doesn't give you peace. You follow it back toward Constantinople, where the skyline waits like jagged teeth against the night. Only this time, the walls aren't your protection. They're your prison. The year is 1204, and you arrive just as the Fourth Crusade crashes against the Queen of Cities. Supposedly, these crusaders were meant to march east, fight for the Holy Land, reclaim Jerusalem. Instead, they've turned on fellow Christians, the Byzantines themselves. And the result? A body count so wild, so brutal, it still echoes centuries later. Picture it, fleets of Venetian galleys lining the Bosporus, their sails blotting the horizon. Siege towers grinding forward on wheels. Crossbow bolts raining like wasps. You stand beneath the walls, craning upward, as defenders hurl stones, pour boiling oil, chant prayers to saints. The clash is deafening. But eventually, the gate breaks. And once inside, the Crusaders show no mercy. Mainstream fact, the sack of Constantinople lasted 3 full days. Soldiers looted palaces, churches, libraries. They desecrated the Hagia Sophia itself, drunken knights staggering through the marble, spilling wine across the altar, mounting horses inside the holiest space of Christendom. Gold mosaics pried from walls, chalices melted for coin, icons shattered beneath boots. Quirky tidbit. Chroniclers claim one prostitute was actually sat on the patriarch's throne in the Hagia Sophia, mocking the liturgy while soldiers jeered and clapped. Imagine the most sacred space you know turned into a frat party from hell. But the worst wasn't just treasure stolen. It was bodies. Streets run red. Civilians cut down, monks beaten, women dragged screaming through alleys. Venetian and Frankish steel slashed through Greeks who hours earlier thought these men were allies. And if you thought the Nika riots were bloody, this was on another level. Tens of thousands slaughtered, with no count even close to exact. Historians still argue whether the Crusaders' rampage was pure greed, or whether Venice orchestrated it as cold calculation to cripple Byzantium, their trade rival. Was it accidental misdirection, or a planned assassination of the empire? The debate continues, but the corpses don't care. You wander deeper into the ruined city, stepping over shattered icons, through smoke that stings your lungs. You see a child kneeling beside her mother's body, shaking her awake. You hear a knight laugh as he smashes a reliquary for the jewels inside. You smell fire licking at old manuscripts that once preserved Greek wisdom from centuries past. Knowledge, beauty, faith, turn to ash. And the irony? Crusaders called themselves soldiers of God. Yet here, under their boots, Constantinople became hell on earth. By the time silence falls, the empire is broken. What's left is a Latin empire squatting on the ruins, and a Byzantine world shattered into fragments. You watch Greeks flee to Nicaea, Epirus, Trebizond, scattering like survivors of a shipwreck. The city that once devoured tragedy now lies gutted, its heart ripped out. The torchlight flickers across your face as you leave the walls. Behind you, Constantinople screams no more, it only smoulders. And you know this truth, sometimes, the bloodiest body counts don't come from enemies at the gate, but from the betrayal of those who called themselves brothers. You don't sleep after the Crusaders' laughter. You drift south, toward the water again, where the sea glimmers faintly like polished obsidian. Only this time, it's not the pirates you fear. It's something worse. You hear the hiss before you see it, the sound of flame meeting waves. This is Greek fire, the empire's most terrifying secret. Imagine standing on a ship, thinking the sea is your ally, only to watch it ignite beneath you. Flames that stick to wood, cling to sails, crawl across water like living beasts. You toss buckets, but the fire only spreads. Men scream, leap overboard, but the blaze rides the waves after them, burning skin, burning lungs, burning the very idea of escape. Mainstream fact? Greek fire was invented in the 7th century, likely by an engineer from Syria named Callinicus. And it kept Byzantium alive. Whole Arab fleets dissolved into ash because of it. During sieges, Byzantine defenders mounted bronze tubes on walls and spewed fire onto ships below, turning harbors into hellscapes. And here's the kicker, no one outside the empire ever cracked the formula. Even today, historians can't agree on the recipe. Quirky tidbit. Some medieval stories insist the fire could only be extinguished with vinegar, sand, or old urine. Picture a panicked crew desperately urinating on the deck to put out flames. Yeah, not exactly a noble last stand. Historians still argue whether Greek fire was more like napalm, a petroleum-based weapon, or some sulfur and saltpeter mixture. Whatever it was, the result was the same, a weapon that turned battlefields into infernos. You're standing on a Byzantine galley now, oars creaking, sailors chanting rhythmically. The brass nozzle mounted at the bow gleams under torchlight. The captain nods once, then the hiss begins. A stream of liquid flame bursts forward, arching across the waves, striking an enemy ship. In seconds, wood crackles, sails collapse, men shriek as they burn alive. Their voices pierce the night, then vanish into steam as they hit the water, still aflame. And you? You can't look away. You smell the pitch, the sulfur, the roasted flesh. You see sailors' faces lit like lanterns as the fire devours their eyes. And you know this isn't just war. It's sorcery. The Empire guarded this secret so tightly that the penalty for leaking it was death. Even emperors rarely knew the full recipe, passed only to trusted engineers like sacred scripture. The strangest part? Sometimes Greek fire was mounted on handheld siphons. Imagine a flamethrower in the 9th century. Soldiers carrying tubes strapped to their backs, blasting streams of fire down alleys, into gates, across fields. One moment you're charging, the next you're a torch. And yet, as terrifying as it was, Greek fire couldn't save Byzantium forever. Enemies adapted, raiding at night, when flame was harder to see, attacking from land, beyond naval reach. Still, for centuries, the fire kept the empire alive, its body counts seared into memory. You lean over the railing as ashes drift across the waves. Somewhere below, fish pick at charred corpses. The sea glimmers again, only now it glimmers with ghosts. And you whisper to yourself, the deadliest secrets aren't always blades or armies. Sometimes, they're a single spark that never goes out. The sea smoke fades, but the empire never gives you rest. You follow winding roads inland again, past vineyards, fields left fallow, villages whispering rumors of armies marching not far away. And sure enough, you hear it. Not pirates. Not foreign raiders. No, this thunder belongs to Greeks killing Greeks. Welcome to the age of Byzantine civil wars. Families tearing themselves apart, cousins raising armies against cousins, generals switching sides like chess pieces tipped with blood. For centuries, Constantinople wasn't just defending its walls against outsiders, it was gnawing its own heart raw. Mainstream fact, between the 11th and 14th centuries, Byzantium endured wave after wave of civil wars. Dynasties like the Komnenoi, the Angeloi, the Palaiologoi, each fractured by claimants who decided the purple robe looked better on them than their relatives. And every time armies clashed, thousands of peasants, mercenaries, and city dwellers ended up in graves, not for empire, not for faith, but for family squabbles. Quirky tidbit. One pretender, John VI Cantacuzenios, supposedly used painted pumpkins as helmets to outfit underfunded troops. Imagine marching into battle with gourds tied to your head, hoping arrows bounce off. Medieval warfare wasn't always polished, it was sometimes downright ridiculous, until the killing started. Historians still argue whether these endless civil wars doomed Byzantium more than outside enemies did. Did the Ottomans conquer a weakened empire, or did the empire destroy itself long before Murm II ever showed up? You're standing on a muddy field now, somewhere in Thrace. The banners of two Byzantine factions ripple against the sky, each showing the double-headed eagle, each claiming to be the real empire. Soldiers shuffle nervously, mercenaries mutter in foreign tongues. And then the horns blow. The clash is thunderous. Shields lock, spears thrust, cavalry crashes like a storm. You see arrows blot out the sun, hear bones crunch under hooves. One side pushes, then falters. Cousins cut each other down, men curse their own names as blood spatters across the imperial banners. You almost laugh through your terror, because you realize the only real winner here is the graveyard. And when the battle ends, the survivors don't even mourn. They switch sides, pledge loyalty to the victor, as if yesterday's blood never mattered. Because in Byzantium, loyalty is as thin as parchment. You trudge through the aftermath, boots sinking into mud-streaked red. You pass a boy no older than 16, clutching his stomach, whispering his mother's name. You see a mercenary grin as he loots the dead, humming a tune off-key. You smell iron so thick it coats your tongue. And somewhere behind it all, in Constantinople, the emperor, whichever cousin won this round, throws a feast, pouring wine, boasting of divine favor. Meanwhile, the countryside bleeds out. The body counts. They're not just numbers. They're the slow erosion of an empire that could have turned all that steel outward, but instead sharpened it against itself. You glance back one last time as crows descend on the field. Their black wings beat like drums. And you wonder, maybe the Ottomans didn't topple Byzantium at all. Maybe Byzantium toppled itself, one civil war at a time, until nothing was left to save. You leave behind the cousin wars and walk into another storm, this one not born of bloodline squabbles, but of mercenaries unleashed like wolves in a pen. The year is the early 1300s, and the empire makes one of its most fatal mistakes: it hires the Catalan Company. Now, picture them, hardened mercenaries from Aragon, battle-scarred veterans of the Reconquista, men who've spent years carving through Moors in Spain and now want pay, land, and glory. Byzantium, desperate for strong arms against Turks in Anatolia, thinks, why not? Let's rent an army. And at first, it works. The Catalans slice through Turkish forces with terrifying skill. Their body counts climb fast, villages saved, roads cleared. You almost think, hey, maybe this gamble pays off. But mercenaries aren't pets. They're predators. And soon, the empire can't pay them. Promises of gold fall short. Food runs thin. Resentment boils. Mainstream fact: by 1305, the Catalan Company turned on their Byzantine employers. Their leader, Roger de Flor, was assassinated in Adrianople, likely with imperial approval. But instead of dissolving, his men roared for vengeance. And vengeance, oh, they delivered. Quirky tidbit. Chroniclers swear the Catalans went so wild that in Thrace, they salted fields just out of spite, not strategy. A medieval version of saying, if we can't have it, no one will. Imagine locals trying to plant wheat in soil sprinkled with bitterness. Historians still argue whether Roger's murder was a tragic misstep or an unavoidable clash between a greedy empire and greedier mercenaries. Either way, what follows is clear: the Catalan vengeance turned Greece into scorched earth. You march with them now, across the plains. Villages once under imperial banners now smoke like funeral pyres. Corpses hang from olive trees as warnings. Women and children trail in chains, the unlucky ones. The Catalans' boots churn mud, their laughter cuts colder than steel. And every town that resists, flattened. Every town that surrenders, stripped bare. The climax of their rampage hits when they seize Athens. Yes, Athens, already a faded jewel by then, becomes their new stronghold. The Parthenon itself, once temple of Athena, now fortress of mercenaries. You stand in its shadow, hearing Catalan songs echoing through marble that once held prayers to gods. And the irony? The Catalans don't just sack and leave. They stay. They carve out their own duchy in Greece, ruling by axe and coin for decades. An empire within the empire's corpse. Byzantium, once the terror of the seas, reduced to begging foreign killers not to destroy its heartland completely. You tread through a ruined village, smoke still curling, and see a boy poking at rubble with a stick. He doesn't even cry anymore. His eyes are too hollow for tears. And you realize, sometimes the deadliest mistake isn't losing a battle. It's thinking you can control men who only worship gold. Byzantium tried to buy survival, and instead bought ruin. You glance back at the Parthenon turned fortress. Its columns glow in torchlight, not holy fire. And you whisper to yourself, this isn't Greece defending itself. This is Greece devoured by the very mercenaries it hired to survive. The Catalan songs fade into the hills, but the silence doesn't last long. You feel it before you hear it, the steady, endless drumbeat, like the earth itself is marching. This isn't a mercenary band or a cousin's rebellion. This is something bigger. Something heavier. the Ottoman shadow stretching over Greece. By the mid-14th century, the empire is already bleeding. Civil wars have drained it, mercenaries have carved it up, and whole provinces are husks. And into this weakness marches the Ottomans, ruthless, efficient, patient. They don't sweep in all at once. They creep, swallowing towns one by one, testing defenses, bribing local lords, turning old Greek strongholds into outposts of their own. Mainstream fact: in 1354, the Ottomans seized Gallipoli after an earthquake weakened its walls. That foothold in Europe changed everything. From there, they pushed deeper into Thrace, into Macedonia, into the very arteries of Greece. And body counts weren't just from battles, they were from sieges, massacres, and forced migrations that followed. Quirky tidbit: some chronicles claim the Ottomans spread terror by using massive kettle drums in battle, beating them so loud that defenders thought the sky itself was collapsing. Imagine being a villager, hearing that low thunder across the plain, realizing it's not a storm but the sound of an empire marching straight for your home. Historians still argue whether Byzantium ever had a chance to stop the Ottomans if they had united earlier, or whether the fall was inevitable the moment Gallipoli slipped away. Was it a failure of leadership, or simply the tide of history? You walk into a Greek town now, its whitewashed walls glowing faintly under moonlight. The streets are eerily empty. Then you see why. The gates stand splintered, the wells clogged with corpses. The Ottomans have passed through. You step over children lying where they fell, merchants slumped against their stalls, icons shattered in doorways. The survivors, those not dead, are gone, dragged into slavery. The silence feels heavier than screams. And when the Ottomans aren't slaughtering, they're recruiting. You pass a line of boys, 10, maybe 12, marched away in chains. This is the Divsum, the child Levi. Every few years, Christian families surrendered sons to be trained as janissaries, elite soldiers of the Sultan. Imagine handing your boy to strangers, knowing he'll return years later in Ottoman armor, sword raised against his own people. A body count measured not in death, but in stolen futures. You march with the Ottoman column now. Their banners flap, crescents gleaming. Their cavalry rides sleek and silent. Their commanders barely glance at the ruined town behind them. To them, this isn't conquest, it's inevitability. And you realize something grim. The empire that once blinded thousands, that once set seas aflame, that once trusted Viking giants, now staggers, unable to lift its sword. The Ottomans don't just crush Greeks in battle. They erase their confidence, their rhythm, their will. You stop at a ridge and look back. Smoke curls from villages, churches stand gutted, olive groves trampled flat. Body counts don't need numbers anymore. The landscape itself is the count, burned, emptied, broken. And far ahead, Constantinople still gleams, still breathes, but you know the shadow is creeping closer every night. The Ottoman drums echo behind you, but now the sound shifts, lighter, scattered, raw. It's not armies that rumble the ground this time, but villagers, farmers, peasants, all dragging whatever tools they can find. Welcome to the uprisings of the powerless, where pitchforks and pruning hooks become weapons, and the body counts climb just as high as on battlefields. You trudge into a muddy road where men in patched tunics and women with baskets-turned helmets gather around a fire. Their leader isn't a noble, not a general, but a farmer with scars on his hands. He holds a rusty sword like it's holy. His voice shakes, but his words burn, better to die standing than live chained. And with that, the mob surges. Mainstream fact: in the late Byzantine and early Ottoman periods, Greek peasants rose in rebellion again and again. From the zealots of Thessalonica in the 1340s, who seized the city and ruled it as a commune, to countless nameless uprisings against landlords, tax collectors, and occupying forces. These weren't polished revolutions. They were explosions of hunger, fury, and desperation. Quirky tidbit. Some uprisings used beehives as weapons, literally hurling hives at advancing soldiers. Picture a swarm of angry bees unleashed on armored men, stinging through every gap in chainmail. Brutal, and kind of hilarious, unless you're the guy inside the helmet. Historians still argue whether these uprisings were doomed from the start or whether they kept alive a spirit of resistance that later fueled Greek independence centuries afterward. Were they hopeless chaos, or necessary sparks? You join the mob as they descend on a landlord's manor. Windows shatter, doors splinter. Peasants storm inside, dragging silk-robed officials into the mud. Screams rip the night as scythes flash, as torches lick up the walls. The manor collapses in fire, a symbol devoured by the rage of the very people it fed upon. But the celebration is short. At dawn, imperial or Ottoman troops arrive. Trained soldiers against farmers. Steel against wood. You watch the line of peasants break almost instantly. Men scatter into the fields, women clutch children, fires burn behind them. And then the slaughter begins. Corpses dot the wheat. Bodies hang from trees as warnings. The rebellion ends in blood. And yet, you notice something strange. Even in defeat, the peasants' eyes don't dim. They whisper about trying again, about the next chance, about refusing chains no matter how many die. Body counts climb, yes, but so does memory. Each death becomes a seed of defiance buried in the soil. You walk away as the soldiers march off, leaving smoke curling above the fields. You pass a boy kneeling beside his father's corpse, clutching the old man's pitchfork. His hands tremble, but his grip tightens. He doesn't cry. He just stares ahead, as if already dreaming of the next uprising. And you realize, sometimes the greatest terror to an empire isn't foreign armies or mercenary wolves. It's the moment the people themselves, barefoot and starving, decide they'd rather burn everything than bow again. The road feels heavier under your steps. Because you know, tonight's rebellion failed. But somewhere ahead, another is already waiting. The smoke of peasant fields drifts behind you, and the path ahead twists toward something unexpected, silhouettes you first mistake for men. But as the moonlight sharpens, you see hair tied back, skirts pulled high, and blades gleaming in calloused hands. These aren't wives left behind, nor daughters hiding in fear. Tonight, you walk with women warriors. You hear their voices before the clash, the steady rhythm of chants, sharp like arrows. They aren't mercenaries or queens, but ordinary women who refuse to stay ordinary when their homes burn. You slip into their ranks, and suddenly you're part of a legend sung around firesides, heroines who cut through invading lines when no one expected it. Mainstream fact: Greece remembers women like Maria of Mani, who led fighters in the rugged south, or the warrior nuns of certain monasteries who allegedly took up arms when invaders stormed their cloisters. Even centuries later, during the Ottoman years, names like Laskaina Bubulina, naval commander and revolutionary, proved the tradition of Greek women in battle wasn't just myth. Quirky tidbit. One chronicle tells of women in Thessalonica hurling pots of boiling cheese, yes, cheese, on attackers scaling the walls. Imagine being a soldier, climbing a ladder, only to get scalded by molten feta raining from above. History may exaggerate, but you have to admit, it's deliciously terrifying. Historians still argue whether the stories of mass female participation are mythic embroidery, men turning women into symbols of resistance, or whether real groups of women consistently fought side by side with men. Were they exceptions, or were the chronicles too embarrassed to admit how many actually took up arms? You march now with a band of Maniot women in the Peloponnese. Their knives gleam in the firelight, their eyes as sharp as their blades. When Ottoman soldiers crest the ridge, expecting docile villagers, they meet shrieks and flashing steel. You watch one woman slam her spear into a cavalryman's chest, dragging him down into the dust. Another tears a banner from its pole and whirls it like a club. The clash is brutal but brief. Bodies scatter on both sides. The women regroup, breathing hard, blood streaked across their faces, not their own, but enemies'. They do not weep. They do not cheer. They stand silent, like the rocks around them, unmovable, ancient. You follow them back to their village. There, children run to mothers, not with tears but with wide, admiring eyes. Old men bow their heads in respect. Tonight, the defenders weren't absent sons or mercenary killers. Tonight, the defenders were the women themselves. You sit near their fire, the sea wind carrying the scent of smoke and salt. One warrior sharpens her knife. Another hums a lullaby while rocking her baby, still wearing her blood-stained tunic. And you realize something: empires count victories in numbers, but families count survival in acts of defiance. These women may not appear in official records, but their body counts, those they struck down, those they saved, echo in every heartbeat that still beats because of them. You close your eyes, the fire crackling, and you think, when history forgets, legend remembers. And sometimes legend is the true story. The lullabies of warrior mothers fade, and ahead the road trembles again. Not with uprisings, not with raids, but with the weight of destiny itself. You stand now in 1453, beneath the towering Theodosian walls of Constantinople, and the night is thicker than all the others before it. You know what's coming. Everyone does. The last stand, the final measure of the empire that once blinded thousands, burned seas with fire, and blinded itself with civil wars. The moon hangs pale over the city. Torches flicker along the battlements. Priests chant in Hagia Sophia, voices echoing as though even God is listening closer tonight. Citizens huddle with rosaries and icons clutched in shaking hands. Some pray. Some sharpen blades. Some simply wait, staring at the ground as if counting their own breaths. Mainstream fact: on May 29, 1453, Sultan Mehmed II launched his final assault on Constantinople after weeks of bombardment with massive cannons, the largest in the world at the time. The defenders numbered maybe 7,000, the Ottomans, perhaps 80,000 or more. The imbalance is staggering, the body count already written in the stars. Quirky tidbit. Chroniclers say Constantinople's defenders chained the Golden Horn shut with a massive iron boom across the water, thinking it would hold back Ottoman ships. Mehmed's answer? He literally dragged ships over land, greasing logs to slide his fleet around the barrier. Imagine watching enemy ships sailing over hills like it was the world's most horrifying magic trick. Historians still argue whether the empire could have survived longer if Western reinforcements had arrived in time, or whether it was already too hollow, too fragile, too exhausted. Was the fall the Ottomans' triumph, or Byzantium's long suicide finally ending? You climb the walls with the defenders now. The air reeks of gunpowder and fear. Below, Ottoman camps stretch like a city of fire, drums pounding like a heartbeat that will not stop. And then, silence. A pause so deep your ears ring. And suddenly, the storm breaks. Waves of soldiers crash against the walls. Arrows scream. Stones from cannons pulverize towers you once thought eternal. You fight beside men who mutter prayers with every strike, beside boys barely strong enough to lift their swords. You watch bodies tumble from ladders, their blood pooling black under torchlight. The walls shake as though the very earth betrays you. Through it all, Emperor Constantine XI fights among his people. No throne, no crown, just sword and shield. He disappears into the chaos, never seen again. Some say he died at the walls, others whisper he turned to marble, waiting to rise again when Constantinople is free. His body count? Impossible to measure. He is everywhere, a shadow in the fire. And then, the breach. A small gate, the Kirkeporte, left open by mistake, or maybe fate. The Ottomans pour through. Defenders scatter. Priests in Hagia Sophia chant louder, voices trembling as invaders smash through doors. You hear the clash of steel against marble, the shattering of icons, the last cries of 1,000 years. You run, but the city runs with you, streets choked with smoke, families trampled, soldiers crushed under waves of janissaries. You stumble over bodies so thick you cannot see the stones beneath. The body count is no longer numbers, it's everywhere you look, every sound you hear, every breath you take. And then, silence again. The cross is torn down, the crescent raised. Constantinople is no more. You stand amid the ashes, unable to move, staring at the skyline that was once the world's jewel. And you realize, you've walked through centuries of slaughter, rebellion, and fire, but this moment feels like all the deaths before finally reached their sum. The empire of Greeks is gone. But the stories remain. The smoke of Constantinople's fall clings to your clothes as you stumble forward, into silence. The drums are gone, the chants silenced, the torches dimmed. What remains is not the thunder of battles but the hollow hush of aftermath. This is life after the fall, where body counts aren't just measured in corpses, but in the collapse of identity, memory, and hope. The city is no longer the Queen of Cities. Now it is Istanbul, under Ottoman banners. Minarets rise where bells once rang. Greek families shuffle through streets with lowered eyes, their language hushed to whispers. Once proud aristocrats now pay taxes in humiliation, watching their sons seized as janissaries, their daughters taken for harems. It isn't a battlefield anymore, but the toll keeps climbing, one stolen child, one silenced prayer at a time. Mainstream fact, after 1453, Greeks entered centuries of Ottoman rule. They were allowed to practice Christianity under the millet system, but at the cost of subjugation. Heavy taxes, forced conversions, and the infamous devshirme system, where Christian boys were taken, converted, and trained as elite soldiers, turned survival itself into a body count. Quirky tidbit. Some families, desperate to hide their children from the devshirme, smeared them with ash, dressed them in rags, or even disguised them as girls. Imagine an Ottoman recruiter lifting a daughter's veil only to find a nervous boy underneath. Sometimes it worked, sometimes not. Historians still argue whether Ottoman rule crushed Greek identity, or paradoxically preserved it. Did centuries under the crescent erase Hellenic spirit, or did oppression forge a unity that kept it alive until independence centuries later? You walk through a burnt-out village now. The church lies roofless, its icons looted. An old man sits on a stone, whispering the Lord's Prayer under his breath as though daring the air to carry it. Around him, children kick at the dirt, carving crosses with sticks, already learning rebellion in silence. And yet, life goes on. Fishermen still cast nets into the Aegean. Shepherds still lead flocks through stony hills. Farmers still kneel in vineyards, pruning the same vines their ancestors did. Survival itself becomes defiance. But death lingers too. You wander into a mountain cave, where villagers hid from Ottoman raiders. Inside, you find blackened walls from fires set to smoke them out. Dozens died there, men, women, children, all huddled together in the dark. No battlefield, no banners, no glory. Just a silent grave that no empire recorded. The body counts of the oppressed are always quieter, but no less vast. And yet, the Greeks remember. They keep memory alive in songs, in whispered lullabies, in festivals disguised as harmless tradition but secretly honoring freedom. Every wedding dance carries rebellion in its steps. Every Easter candle lit feels like a sword unsheathed. The Ottomans may own the city, but the people keep the soul. You descend from the mountains, and the night air tastes different now. Less of fire, more of endurance. Less of screaming, more of whispers. You realize, conquest ends battles, but it never ends memory. The fall of Constantinople wasn't just the death of an empire. It was the beginning of centuries where every Greek life lost, whether on a battlefield, in a tax collector's ledger, or in a cave filled with smoke, became another notch in a hidden count. A count not of defeat, but of survival. You walk on, the stars above like cold watchfires. Behind you, the empire is gone. Ahead of you, its people remain. And that may be the greatest defiance of all. You drift now into the deepest stretch of night, past smoldering ruins and quiet fields, and what lingers are not the battles, not the sieges, not even the desperate uprisings. What lingers are echoes. Whispers. Ghost numbers that refuse to fade. Everywhere you step, you hear them. The hollow streets of Constantinople hum with the memory of chanting priests. The mountains of Mani echo with women's cries, their blades still glinting in unseen firelight. Villages abandoned centuries ago still groan when the wind rattles through their stones, as though the walls themselves are reciting the names of the lost. Mainstream fact: Greek folklore is heavy with ghost stories tied to history, phantoms of warriors at Thermopylae, monks who never left Mount Athos, or the marble emperor, Constantine XI, who legend says sleeps beneath the Golden Gate, waiting to rise again. These aren't just myths, they're how the body counts of the past keep walking beside the living. Quirky tidbit. In some villages, families swore that when a baby was born, they could hear faint knocks from old battlefields nearby, as though ancestors were keeping tally, adding a line to their eternal roster. Death and birth became one conversation. Historians still argue whether these tales preserve memory or distort it, whether legends like the sleeping emperor were comforting lies, or cultural lifelines that kept a people alive through centuries of oppression. Did the ghosts weigh them down, or carry them forward? You sit by a ruined church now, moonlight spilling through its broken dome. Every creak of stone, every rustle of grass, feels alive. You realize the numbers, the tens of thousands blinded, the fleets burned, the families scattered, aren't gone. They're breathing here, with you. They've seeped into the soil, the sea, the stars overhead. And as you listen, you start to count too. Not in fear, not in dread, but in wonder, because the Greeks endured it all. Body counts may measure death, but survival is measured in whispers that never stop. So you let yourself slow down now, your steps lighter, your breath deeper. The fires fade to embers, the echoes soften into lullabies. Where there was shouting, there's only a hush, a long exhale from the centuries themselves. You picture the Aegean at dawn, still, calm, painted in silver. Fishermen rocking gently in their boats. Hillsides carrying the scent of thyme and sea salt. Stones warm under the rising sun. Life returns, always, even after the darkest nights. The ghosts remain, but not to frighten you. They stand quietly, almost protective, shadows keeping watch so you can rest. The numbers are no longer sharp, they dissolve into stories, into songs, into memories passed hand to hand, generation to generation. You close your eyes. The city walls, the burning fleets, the chanting priests, they all blur into mist, floating away like smoke on a morning breeze. What's left is only calm. And maybe that's the real end of the story, not the body counts, not the battles, not the ruins. But the simple fact that you are still here, listening, breathing, alive. Proof that survival itself can outnumber death. Let the night hold you. Let the voices quiet. Drift with the sea, breathe with the stones, rest with the centuries. And when you wake, the world will still be here. Softer. Quieter. Waiting. Good night.